Hello and welcome to the Fast and the Curious with me, Betty Glover, and Christian Hugill, debriefing on what was an absolutely fascinating Hungarian Grand Prix. I can't get over it, Christian.
You know when you were kids and there's like the calm after your parents had a row and you sat on the stairs and listened to them and you felt a bit awkward in your stomach after. It's like, have they stopped rowing? And there was that sort of, it feels a bit uneasy in this house now. Just all feels a bit uneasy.
There's so much to talk about because obviously you've got all of these elements. You had Max Verstappen being a grumpy teenager. You had Lewis Hamilton back on the podium. But the big thing that happened, obviously, that we need to talk about straight away is that Oscar Piastri won his first Grand Prix, which is absolutely amazing. But Christian, the circumstances weren't brilliant. It was a bit subdued. We had a McLaren 1-2. But Lando could have won it and he had to move aside so Oscar could win it. Where do you want to start with all of this?
Well, let me start where you started with Oscar winning his first Grand Prix. It's always major when a driver wins their first Grand Prix, but this is the least surprising debut first win for as long as I can remember, because it has been so obvious for so long that this win is coming. And I'm delighted it has, and I hope he thoroughly enjoys the celebration. That said, it is a crying shame it has happened in such bizarre, unusual, awkward, stomach-turning circumstances, and that has all happened through McLaren royally cocking it up. And it is unbelievable to say that McLaren have cocked something up, considering they seem to have the quickest car in Formula One. Brilliant. They've secured their first 1-2 for bloody ages. Brilliant. And yet this just doesn't feel like the massive celebration it could be, because they made such a big mistake, which we'll dig into.
One thing that we need to talk about actually is that we said when Oscar Piastri wins his first ever Grand Prix, it would be such a massive moment. And as a podcast, we would be so buzzing because we've been with him from the very start, that we would be popping bottles of Prosecco out of our windows, getting the confetti up there, just everything would pop off. Do you feel like you want to pop your bottle of Prosecco?
It doesn't feel right. It would feel, I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but no, I don't. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
If you ever sort of popped champagne out, I'd feel a bit like,
When he won and he's talking on the radio, it should have been absolute scenes. He should have been
jubilation.
Like absolutely out of his head, happy with himself. Jubilation, should have been scenes, and it just was so low, wasn't it, the mood? And he deserves so much more than that, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's a shame because you only ever get one first win, and it feels like it will be shaded, and I've no doubt Oscar will win more Grand Prix. But the two drivers, in my opinion, are the two who've done nothing wrong. Nothing. Well, they both drove exceptional Grand Prix. And the thing for me is, listen, let's explain for those new to Formula One what went wrong. And it was a very simple situation. If you are running 1-2 and you pit first, you have got an advantage because you get a lap sooner on fresher, shinier tyres, and you can go faster, and you can therefore go faster on your shinier, newer tyres, and you're on them a lap earlier, so you hop ahead of the driver in front of you. It's called the undercut. Oscar did the better job off the start. Oscar took the lead. Oscar was commanding the Grand Prix. After the first set of stops, it was all Oscar. But then McLaren seemed to be too worried about Lewis Hamilton. They seemed to be too worried about covering off Lewis in third, so decided to pit Lando, who was in second first, and he overcut Oscar. But what happened was they've got a 3.5 second gap then when they came out. And it's all very well turning around to Lando, as they did on the radio, and saying, yeah, let Oscar back through. But he's 3.5 seconds up the road. And at that point of a Grand Prix, you don't want to give away 3.5 seconds because anything could happen. And, potentially Lewis could have got Lando and Lando could have slipped further and further back. And that's before we even bring in the title fight ramifications. So
can I just jump in? Did they do that because they were worried about Hamilton?
For all intensive purposes, that's what it seemed to me.
And was that fair?
It was not fair. It's not fair because it puts Lando ahead, and that's why they wanted to swap them round. So it's not fair. So you could have said, we're going to give Lando the advantage because he is taking the fight to Max Verstappen, and we want to put him in the lead. And sorry, Oscar, your time will come, but we are focusing on winning the Drivers' World Championship. Lando's in the position to do that. You're not. But they didn't do that. So it suggests it was in covering Lewis. That's the only other feasible explanation behind it. And then if you're Lando Norris, you're in an impossible position because it's like, well, hang on, I don't want to wait 3.5 seconds. If he's right behind me, all right, fair enough. You've made a mistake, fine. Now, the flip side to that is, could Lando have let Oscar pass straight away, given up the 3.5 seconds, then overtaken him again if he had the pace? But again, well, would McLaren have allowed him to do so? Would that have looked awful on Lando and saying, well, they just went straight past me? They put both drivers in an almost impossible situation.
McLaren definitely win the award, don't they, for the most awkward radio? Because, oh my God, that conversation between Lando Norris and his race engineer, Will Joseph, was so awkward to watch. It was unbelievable.
I've got every sympathy for Lando. I've got every sympathy because...
Do you? Because I think some people agree with you completely and they think, like, Lando... Well, there's so many reasons why Lando should have potentially stayed in that position. I mean, somebody messaged the Fast and the Curious, the listener, saying, can someone explain to me why McLaren wanted Oscar to win? Because I would assume that the guy closer in the championship to Max would be the priority.
Hang on. Let's answer that question, right? It looked like Oscar was going to win. Oscar had done the better job in turn one, got ahead, stayed ahead in the first round of pit stops. He deserved that chance to go and stake his claim for the win. But Lando Norris also deserved his chance in the final stint to overtake on track. So that's why McLaren did it. They wanted to hang on, we messed that up. Let's put it back. And that's very easy to do if your cars are next to each other on track. It's not easy to do when Lando's 3.5 seconds up the road. But then to answer your second question, Betty, when you said, well, do you think that? Yeah, no, I do. Because as a racing driver, through no fault of your own, you found yourself in the race lead 3.5 seconds up the road, having done nothing wrong, when you know that you've got a great big opportunity to take points off your title rival. And then you've got on the team where you've got to give the place back. It's not Lando's fault. And these guys are winners. Yes, it's a team sport. Of course it's a team sport. But Lando Norris wants Lando Norris to win. He's got the chance of fighting Max Verstappen. He's waited years in his Formula One career for the quickest car on the grid. And he's got it. He's got the chance to fight for a world championship. Yeah. And he's been furious with himself in recent weeks. Furious for making mistakes. Now he's got the chance to win the race. And he's got his own team on the radio saying, you've got to give it back. It's a horrible position to be in. And I think Lando comes out of this with great credit that he did give the place back. He was sportsmanlike. He knew that McLaren have given him his chance in Formula One. I think Lando takes great credit. I think Oscar takes great credit. The drivers have no fault in this for me. That they've been put in a horrible situation by their team.
I think there were a lot of people in McLaren for a moment were thinking, oh my God, is he going to give this spot back? I bet they were. It was...
I was listening to F1 TV's commentary with David Coulthard, who was told to give a race win to Mika Hakkinen a long time ago. And he did. And he has always said he regrets that. Because what are McLaren going to do? Sack him, and a race win's a race win. And David looks back on that. I think David had 13 Grand Prix wins. That was always the one that got away. If I'm Lando Norris, I'm saying, actually, I am taking the fight to Max Verstappen. I'm going to do everything. Imagine the situation now, right? If Lando Norris loses this World Championship to Max Verstappen by 3 points, he will regret what he has done today for the rest of his life. And McLaren will have to live with that.
Do you think that this is an element of McLaren needing more experience in being at the front of the pack?
In recent weeks and months, McLaren have, to me, who looked like a team who are not used to winning Grand Prix. You have to get everything right to win a Grand Prix. And, you know, Max Verstappen made it look too easy. Red Bull made it look too easy last year. And look at Silverstone. And I said this on the Silverstone post-race debrief. Mercedes won that race because they got everything right. McLaren didn't.
Yeah.
I think it's great for the sport that McLaren are up there fighting, but this should show them that it's like, okay, we need, and I do think it'll come. I do think it will come. I don't think we'll be still in this position later on in the season, but they need to get rid of the dustiness of being right up at the front end, because The only thing I can think of now is, that, as I said earlier in the podcast, is that they were trying to cover off Lewis Hamilton, and for all the world, they didn't need to. So listen, God love McLaren. I'm delighted for them getting the 1-2. They deserve all the praise in the world for turning it round. How many times have we said, Betty, in Bahrain, it looked like, my goodness me, Red Bull are going to walk it. And McLaren have done an amazing job. All credit to them. But they've got to start getting rid of these little mistakes, because God, we've seen what can happen today.
This was, do you think something like this was always going to happen when you've got such a good driver lineup? And I know Lando is better than Oscar at the moment, but they're quite close as well, aren't they? And we know that Oscar has been breathing down Lando's neck for a long time. So is something like this always bound to happen?
No. An incident between the two drivers is bound to happen. Look at it. All close teammates in F1 do it at some point. It happened between Verstappen and Ricciardo. It happened between Rosberg and Hamilton. And I think there'll be an on-track moment between the two of them at some point. And then, Betty, if you said to me, Christian, was this always going to happen? I'd say, yeah, it was always going to happen. But this sort of thing shouldn't happen, because the team should manage the race better. And goodness me, for the rest of the season now, there is going to be nerves for McLaren, because if Lando loses this, but what's the, so 25 to 18, what's the difference? 7 points? Well, my maths isn't very good, but whatever it is. If Lando loses the championship to Max by a 7-point margin.
But as a team, it was a huge weekend for them, wasn't it? Because if you look at the constructors, you've got Red Bull now on 389 and McLaren on 338. So that 1-2 is crucial.
There are huge positives for McLaren. They deserve all the praise in the world for what they have done with this car and getting it up there. Phenomenal. Sensational. Race management, big area to be improved. But McLaren have been sensational in getting this car. They've been sensational in getting the two drivers that they've got, in persuading Lando to stay, in nicking Oscar from Alpine, in being brutal enough to ditch Daniel Ricciardo. McLaren have done phenomenally. And when you've got Sergio Perez in Red Bull, who is absolutely determined to make it as difficult as he possibly can be for Red Bull to keep him on, despite the fact they really want to, this championship is on. But on another day, yes, this did not cost them any net points, but decision making like this and mistakes like this, 9 times out of 10 in Formula One, cost you points.
Would you rather be a fly on the wall at the McLaren debrief or the Red Bull debrief?
Oh, McLaren. Red Bull will be predictable as hell. And let's be honest, Christian Horner's so attracted to Drive to Survive cameras. We'll all see the debrief at Red Bull anyway on Drive to Survive in the next season. Christian Horner can't go to the loo without Drive to Survive filming it. So we'll all see that anyway. Don't need to. If you're going to use your fly on the wall points, go into McLaren.
Oh yeah, it'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Oh.
I hope they will. I hope the drivers are okay. And because Lando, his interviews with Nico Rosberg post-race were very dignified. And he seems, I've been critical of Lando being too hard on himself. And this weekend, he was brilliant across practice. He was brilliant in qualifying. He still seems to have an issue getting off the line. But he actually, the likes of me saying he needs to be a bit better, he has been this weekend, albeit getting off the line. And I just hope they're both okay, because it's such a tricky situation for those drivers.
I think they will both be okay. I think in the end, it was all right.
And they've got huge respect for each other.
Exactly, and you can tell
they do genuinely go well. You can tell there's huge respect for each other. I just think, McLaren will think we've got away with one here, because on another day like that could cost us something. So
yeah, Lewis Hamilton could have swept through, couldn't he? Zach Brown, the McLaren head honcho, the big dog at McLaren, CEO, deals with things very well. He's a proper businessman. You can tell, when you speak to him, he is very good at communicating, etc., etc. How do you think he is going to deal with this one, with these two drivers?
I don't think, and the team principal Andrea is the same. They're amazing, and the thing is, Andrea and Zach deserve all the praise in the world for how they've turned McLaren round, and they've done that through fantastic management. And there's plenty of people back at the McLaren factory who were at McLaren and part of that McLaren team who were at McLaren when they were regularly winning races, be it in the 90s, be it with Hamilton in the 2000s. I just think I suspect it's a keep it calm situation for them, and sense of saying, listen, let's learn from this. When you make mistakes in Formula One, all you can do is learn from it.
In life, Christian.
In life,
When you make a mistake, you learn
and I
from
think
it.
that's what they'll do here. They'll think, okay, this hasn't gone as well as it could have gone. Let's look at what we can do differently. And it's a shame, and it's all got. Listen, everybody on that McLaren team will come away from this weekend with a slightly uncomfortable feeling. And I'd be very surprised, Betty, to answer your question, if Zach started giving the hairdryer treatment. I don't see it. I think it'll be a case of let's keep calm, let's analyse what we did wrong, let's learn from it. And I said this earlier, and I do believe it. I don't think we'll see this for a long time for McLaren. I do genuinely believe they'll get this out their system. We're just seeing the final sort of bits of McLaren going from fighting for podiums to being right up there in a title fight. And these little bits of inexperience, these little mistakes will, I think, get less and less and less.
Let's talk about Red Bull then and Max Verstappen, because I'm sorry, but I was absolutely obsessed with Max Verstappen during the Hungarian Grand
You
Prix.
were, weren't
I
you? You were
just
texting
couldn't
the
get
group.
enough of him. He was just popping off on the radio, wasn't he? He was not in a good way. He was grumpy. He was not happy. What stood out for you with him? Was it that him trying to overtake Lewis Hamilton?
Well, I'll tell you what stood out for me. Let me read you GP, as race engineer's message that he gave Max after Max had made his move. Now, to me, I don't know about you, Betty, to me, that move looked too far back, out of control, and he clipped Lewis.
Yeah.
And by the way, we've always seen all season, Red Bull, no matter, Max could steal candy from a child in a playground. And Christian Horner would come on and go, I think, that lollipop was there for the taking. I think that's what Max does. If the child left the lollipop there, Max will take it. Was this the first time we've seen for a while, actually, Red Bull or someone in Red Bull sort of standing up to him? He said, I'm not even going to get into a radio fight with the other teams, Max. We'll let the stewards do their thing. It's childish on the radio. Childish. We've had Max, as you said, Betty, all race being, all right, Max, yes, we know that car is not as good as you want it to be, but he's been getting really cross on the radio. And then he did a move that, to me, looked silly.
He just lost his head, I think. I think he was getting impatient.
I just think that was finally GP turning around and going, come on, Max. And it just feels like everything, a bad thing happens, Max goes, that was someone else's fault.
Yeah.
And was that the first time that Red Bull are turning around going, actually, Max, all right, yeah, the car isn't good enough. McLaren are quicker, but what was so impressive from the McLaren drivers all Grand Prix was how cool the two of them stayed. Throughout the whole thing, both drivers stayed really cool. You didn't have that with Max today.
No, he was a bit different, wasn't he? He's not usually as bad as this, but he was grumpy. He was snapping back.
So Lewis Hamilton got that podium because of a Max Verstappen error for me. And by the way, I said this at Silverstone, Max can stay second. Max can finish second. He only needs to come second, third, fourth. As long as he keeps consistently plugging away, he will win this World Championship. So he's given away unnecessary points by lunging up the inside of Lewis when he didn't need to. So a bad weekend for Max, I would suggest.
Yeah, and he was complaining about the car, wasn't he? And it's like grip, etc. But he was also moaning about their strategy. So it was like he was just in a bad place. He was moaning about absolutely bloody everything. It was like me when I was 17 and got back from a house party and hadn't slept all night and was just grumpy.
Snapping, yeah. Well
Snappy,
yes,
yeah.
Yes, the strategy gave him work to do, but actually he probably would have worked. He probably would have got third, which is best he could hope for today. Yes, it gave him hard work by making him pass on track, by making him pit later. But actually, I think it had worked. So I don't think he's got that much to complain about.
My favourite bit was when he went,
go on.
Don't give me that now. You guys gave me this strategy. I'm just trying to rescue my race.
And then Betty, you said, what about Red Bull? I mean, I can't, Red Bull have been so quick to ditch drivers in the past, and it feels like that's the only reason why they haven't got rid of Sergio Perez, but I do not see how he comes back from this.
No.
And awful weekend for him, an absolutely awful weekend.
The pressure's just raining down on him now. It's getting worse and worse, and he's not helping himself at all, is he?
No, no, no. And oh, right, yeah, actually, seventh isn't a bad recovery drive at all. But he should be coming seventh because that's where the car is. He should be recovering to that extent. So again, yeah, and we've seen this so many times throughout the past couple of seasons. Good Sunday, didn't really put a foot wrong on Sunday,
Mm.
but you can't be making the mistakes he's making and expect to keep your drive. And I think at the moment, um, is Daniel Ricciardo doing a sensational job? No, he finished 12th today. Yuki finished 9th. Again, it's Yuki bringing in the points. But I do totally see the logic in sticking in your experienced driver as a sort of stopgap until the end of the season, where you can maybe say, well, if Yuki carries on performing the way he is until the end of the season, do we give it Yuki for 2025? I can see the benefit of sticking Yuki in now because he's had the best season of his career. I just think in Ricciardo and Tsunoda, they've got two better options. Whichever one, I can see arguments to pick either one of them. And then Liam Lawson, the natural replacement there to step in at RB. It's just so logical.
The thing is with Daniel Ricciardo as well is that he will go to Red Bull if they choose him, and he will be able to be there in the garage with Max Verstappen and just not be intimidated by any of it because he's been there, he's done it before. Whereas Yuki, you don't know if that's going to happen.
There is solid arguments to stick either of them in, and then you wouldn't even have the thing of, yeah, well, who would then go into RB? And Checo wouldn't want to be demoted. Well, you've got Liam Lawson, who's just, I still think it's mad that Liam isn't on the grid at all, let alone looking at next year. So I just don't see, there's nothing I can say. I know, by the way, I like Checo. Everyone likes Checo. Lovely guy. Everybody likes the guy. Lovely, lovely, lovely man who actually has done really well in that seat in some parts and won Grand Prix and was brilliant in the 2021 title battle in helping Max. But I think his time has come in that seat now.
Something huge, absolutely huge, that we've skated over is that Lewis has got himself onto back-to-back podiums for the first time this season.
How many times were we saying earlier in the season it was George who was looking the more impressive one of the two? And yet it was Lewis who swept past George to take the lead at the British Grand Prix. Granted, George was then desperately unlucky with a mechanical failure. It was George who didn't put in the lap when he needed to in qualifying. Granted, Mercedes also made a mistake in not fueling him enough to do a second run if he needed it in qualifying. But Lewis has really, really, at the start of the season, we were saying it was Sainz who was in better form of the Ferrari drivers. Then Leclerc's pulled it back. We do now seem to be seeing at Mercedes, Lewis really sorting his form out and being very impressive in these last couple of races. So 2 very, very good Grand Prix for Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, really impressive. And also, it must be a confidence thing, mustn't it? He's won Silverstone, he's won a Grand Prix for the first time in ages. He can now back it up by being on the podium again. And obviously, if Max had maybe not lost his head, Lewis wouldn't have come third, but he was in the right place at the right time and he drove really well, so he deserves it.
The whole thing, well, if Max wouldn't lose his head is irrelevant. He did, and Lewis didn't. And Lewis kept his cool, and Lewis deserves that P3. Lewis is on. These things don't happen by accident. The same way when George won his race, I said, listen, George didn't get in a scrap. Max and Lando did in Austria. He was the best of the rest. He deserved that win. You make your own luck in Formula One, and no, Lewis deserves that podium, and will now take the lead in the driver standings of the two Mercedes drivers as well. I'm 99% sure I'm right in thinking, Lewis on 125 points, George now on 116. So, Lewis has done fantastically. But look at this, wins for Max, Lando, Charles, Oscar, Lewis, not for Checo, and for George as well. Unbelievable. What a season we're having. What a season we're in forward to now the end of the year.
Things are really starting to look up for Mercedes as well. So I think this is a really good time to speak to somebody inside that Mercedes camp. So an episode that is going to be dropping later this week is going to be with Chief Communications Officer Bradley Lord. We had a nice little chat with him the other day, didn't we, Christian?
Yeah, we caught up with him last week. It was fascinating. Obviously, spoke a little bit about Lewis's win and obviously George's win in Austria and what a season it's been for them. So that will be the next episode you'll hear of the Fast and the Curious. A lovely catch up with Bradley Lord, who's just a fascinating man as well. Fascinating insight into the sport. Was last on the podcast at the very start of the season when we were at pre-season testing. So we'll play that catch up with Bradley later on in the week.
Yeah, and I'm sure he will be pretty happy with the Hungarian Grand Prix results as well. I think they'll be buzzing that Lewis managed to get on a podium. Is there anyone else that you want to talk about before we go?
Well, listen, the story of this race, isn't it, is the story of this race is McLaren. You know, this will dominate the Formula One headlines for a long time now. And going into Spa before the summer break, McLaren will want to say, listen, we've got the fastest car, and they will want to iron out the gremlins that have happened and put this to bed for the summer break so they can have a little bit of a break knowing and feel a little more positive. It's insane to say that McLaren will want to feel more positive given what we've seen in a 1-2 and a phenomenal car performance, but they will want to prove to themselves in Spa before the summer break that they can go and win a Grand Prix and not have any of the messiness, any of the mistakes, and then go into the second half of the season post-summer break thinking, right, we've got rid of all of those glitches and gremlins. We've got the fastest car. We've got drivers. It's going to be all positive from here because, as I said earlier, we've still got to praise McLaren massively. Nobody saw them winning, getting a 1-2 with them being comfortably the quickest cars in Bahrain. So huge positives for McLaren, albeit today could have been smoother.
It could have, but do you know what? Oscar Piastri is never going to forget his first race win, is he? His first Grand Prix win.
He is not. And listen, we should say, how many times have we said on the Fast and the Curious, he was the first interview we ever recorded for this podcast. He's a great guy. He comes on, he has fun with us. We're delighted that McLaren have such a great relationship with us and give us Lando and Oscar. And we are delighted for Oscar getting his first win. He so deserves it. Great guy. And I firmly believe it'll be the first of many.
What a riveting afternoon we've had, Christian.
It's the drama, Mick. I just love it. I
It's
just
the
love it.
drama,
Tell you what I also love, actually.
Me?
No, I do love you. You know I love you. But I also love NordVPN.
I know you love NordVPN, Christian, because you do not stop going on about it, but I love it too. That's why we talk about it all the time. It is such a good life hack for F1 fans all over the world, isn't it?
F1 having a sort of global nature to it and going into different countries enables you to, if you are in those different countries, change your virtual location back to the UK and catch up on your favourite telly. But Betty, there's an advantage even if you are in the UK and want to make out that you're somewhere else.
Wow. Do you know what? If you're planning a holiday, which I'm trying to do with my friends right now, and it's the biggest ball ache of my entire life, but NordVPN can actually help plan your travel because, like we always say, some flights and hotel fees can change, basically, depending on where you book them from. So you can change your location when you're sorting all of your logistics out with your annoying friends, and it can help you spend less money.
Your friends might be annoying, but what won't be annoying is buffering or lagging, because even when you're using NordVPN abroad, I used it as far away as Texas, as far away as Miami, and it was smooth sailing, the internet. She was beautifully fast and smooth, the internet.
No, you're not giving her a gender. I'm sorry, I'm not having that.
No, the internet's a she. The internet's absolutely a she.
No, it's not. Anyway, to get your best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/TFATC. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. And guys, there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the description of this episode.
As many as 4 extra months.
Anyway, we'll be back soon with the one and only Bradley Lord. As always, send your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, anything that you want to @FastCuriousPod, and we'll get back to you. And also make sure you subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts so you do not miss a thing, because we love just popping up with random episodes, don't we? Every now and then.
Don't we just?
Anyway, see you soon.
Goodbye, Betty Glover.